even though, since most poskim would say that Christianity is shituf, it's a mixture of different gods. So even there's a slight monotheistic idea there, but that's forbidden for a Jew. And so he holds that, therefore, the imitation of the Christian, even though it's permitted for even though Christianity is permitted for Christians, it's not considered pure avodah zarah, idolatry for Christians. Still, for a Jew to imitate it would be a violation of Chukotayim. But he's assuming right at this moment that it's not just a cultural issue, that it's avodah zarah, it's an imitation of idolatry. The Lashon Ashkenaz. And he says we should translate the word avodah zarah, idolatry, into German or into Yiddish, which is fremder kultus, which means a foreign cult. Loba midas getztad danst. In other words, idolatry means a foreign cult. It does not mean this up. Getting what it was. It was actually in Google Translate. Right. It's not a god. It's not just a different god. It is a foreign cult. So he says in the Gemara we have two different indications of what it means to walk in their ways, which is forbidden. The Gemara in Avodah Zarah says one thing, and the Gemara in Sanhedrin says another. The Avodah Zarah maskinan kach sarfen al hamalachim mishum b'sreif alav chukahi. There was a custom that they would, when the king died, they would burn like the king's clothes in his articles. It couldn't be used by anybody else. It's considered a lack of honor to take the king's robe and give it to a new king. So they would burn it all. So the question is that if we would do that for a Jewish king, which he might do out of honor, you're not allowed to wear the king's clothes, is that considered walking in the way of non-Jew? So the Gemara says that's not called walking in the way of non-Jew. It's just a way of honoring the king. It's true that they honor their king the same way we honor our king, because that's what's considered honor, not wearing the king's clothes. It doesn't make it make it walking in their ways. And Kamosh Pirish Rashi, the lav chok avodah zarah hu l'shem avodah zarah ela shemar and shmis sarfan alav yisozach shuvalem. Because it's not a sign of worship, burning the king's clothes, it's just a sign of honor for the king. Therefore, in Rashi, that's why it's permitted. So it sounds like from that Gemara that walking in their ways is about imitating their idolatry practice. Sanhedrin must get into Sreifa Shari, but the Gemara in Sanhedrin says you're allowed to burn the king's clothes. Mishum dekevin dechtiv ba'oraita lav minayhu gamrinan. That since it is written in the Torah, must be an instance of this. Therefore, it must be permitted. Mashma delakuli amachukahi. According to that Gemara, it sounds like it would be a problem, and it would be forbidden if it wasn't written in the Torah that was done by Jewish kings. People try to give different answers to solve this contradiction. Gemara, and there's different opinions. In other words, the primary question being, is walking in their ways about imitating their idolatry, or is walking in their ways anything cultural? In Tosas, it says, the Trey Gavne Chukah. So Tosas understands the contradiction between those two Gemaras, that there are two kinds of chukim. There's two kinds of practices of the non-Jew. One is a practice where it's idolatrous, and the second is where it's just silly. It doesn't have any reason. It's done just because of style. A bar galivshar governor. I don't know if I have any. This works. Mark, yeah, great. Superstitious use. Okay, very good. You'll remember we had some discussion of not walking in their ways, that it was a problem of walking the ways of their superstitions. So one possibility Tosa says is that one category of walking in their ways is it's an imitation of idolatry. The other one is that it's an imitation of their superstition. So because it's not a practical thing, because it's not, you remember that from the Maram Shik, that because it doesn't have a practical purpose, so doing what they do is clearly just to imitate. If it's an imitation of, if burning the clothes of the king is an imitation of something idolatrous, then the fact that it's written in the Torah that they did it doesn't help. It's still idolatrous. Because we have many things that at the time of our ancestors was not considered idolatry, but later on became idolatry. For instance, the idea of all of these in the Torah, they're always building these matzevot, these monoliths or piles of stones. And that was clearly normal. That was clearly just a way of commemorating a place or making a covenant. But later on, that became something idolatrous. So you weren't allowed to do it. So just because it's in the Torah doesn't prove it's not idolatry. That would be forbidden even if it's written in the Torah that our ancestors did. Okay. Ran b'chidush Sanhedrin. The Ran writes on Sanhedrin. Rabbanan kevan dechtiv b'sayif ba'oraita lav menei okum. Then yesh farshim shatam b'zeh shatar kadma lahem bein mafsik. Let me do a Gemara with you. Oh, he's going to quote here. So the Gemara says, Yotzin bebeitza sachargo. You can go out on Shabbos carrying a locust egg with a fox tooth, a nail from someone who was crucified. Why would you do those things? For the purpose of healing. Those things are considered healing. They're considered things that would, we probably don't consider this healing anymore. But at one time, I guess those things were considered refuah. They were considered, before ibuprofen, you had a fox tooth, hold on to that, I guess. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's what Rabbi Meir said. So, cham osum af b'chol. And the rabbis say, no, it's forbidden. Not only is it forbidden on Shabbos to carry it, it's forbidden to carry a locust egg and a fox tooth and a nail from a cross, even on a weekday. Why? Because these are not proven methods of healing. Rather, they're superstitions. Darkei ha'emori, very common term in Jewish law. The Amorites were very superstitious. And we want to be very careful. The Gemara even says that you don't search with a candle for chametz in certain places because people will think that you're doing some kind of idolatrous Amorite rite. There's a lot of things, even things like kashla and kaparis. A lot of opinions had a very, very big problems with that because they felt that it was Amorite. It was like an Amorite practice because it doesn't have an obvious reason. It's not proven to work, and therefore, why are you doing it? That's superstition. That would be forbidden. Yotzin.
I guess currently people sometimes carry around a rabbit's foot as a good luck charm.
Right. That could be usser. In other words, if you're doing it, yeah, that could be a problem. Yotzin bebeitza unless it works. It works. Yotzin bebeitza sachar. So Gemara says you're allowed to go out according to Rabbi Meir with a locust egg. Avdi de shilcha. Because it's good for earaches. Ushen shel shul d'avdi l'shinta. And a fox tooth is good because it helps you sleep. The chaya leman denayis. Tooth of a live fox for one who sleeps, too much to wake him up, and the tooth of a dead fox for one who does not sleep. I should try that. And one who goes out with a nail from a cross, use it as a talisman for curing infection. Okay, these were ideas. Well, did Rabbi Meir, Shumar Fulah. Rabbi Meir says it works and it's for healing. Abai and Rava both say if it works, if it's for healing, maybe it doesn't have to be proven that it works, but if the understanding is that you're doing it in order for healing, you're not doing it to imitate the superstition of the non-Jew, that'd be permitted. So the Gemara asks, are you saying that if it doesn't heal, then automatically whatever you're doing is Amorite practice? But Tanya, didn't we learn in a Braita, Elaine Shemashamer Perotav, a tree that is not holding on to its fruit long enough for it to ripen. Sokro, you paint it. V'tzovea sokro, v'tzovea oso beskira. You paint it. This here with red paint, and you put stones around. So the Gemara says, putting stones around it, putting stones around it, that actually helps because it strengthens the tree. So that would be permitted. But painting it red, how does that help the tree? That just seems like superstition. Where it says, it's because everybody will see the tree. They'll see that it's painted red. They'll know that the tree is having trouble, and they will pray for mercy for this tree. As it says, "V'tamei tamei yikra," that a person who is tamei, who's impure, who has sarat, who has leprosy, he should say tamei tamei, impure, impure. Now the pshat is that it's to keep people away from him. But why does he have to publicize it? Because people have to know that he's in pain. Because then people will pray for him. It's an interesting question comes into play today. If a person is ill, should they tell people? Some people don't like to tell people, but then people can't daven. So Amar Ravina, Kaman, Talinan, Kose Bedikla. So Ravina said, the opinion that we hang bunches of unripe dates on a palm tree that's not holding on to its dates, we are allowed to do that because it's according to the Tana that even though it doesn't work, it publicizes to the masses that they should pray for, I guess, this farmer who's having trouble with trees. So what do you see from this Gemara? You see that if it's practical, if it has a purpose. And by the way, the early reformers argued that you should use an organ. Why should you use an organ? They didn't just say, we want to be more like the Germans. They said, if you want to honor God, use an organ. That's how we honor things today. That's what it means to be honorable. It's not crazy. You see from the Ran that if something is for Avodah Zarah, it's forbidden. But with everything else, if it's not idolatry per se, it's just a custom of the non-Jew, then you have to ask the question, does this work or not? If it's just superstition, it doesn't work, then it would be forbidden. But if it works, or it's going to get people to beseech God for mercy on something's behalf, then just because the non-Jew doesn't make it forbidden, it has a practical purpose. But if it doesn't, then even though it's not avodah zarah, even though it's not idolatry, it will still be forbidden, like a rabbit. I'm not saying that it's forbidden, but maybe everybody realizes it's ridiculous. But so it's an interesting question where you draw the line. So he says, therefore, according to this distinction, it's true. If you said the organ is not avodah zarah, it's not idolatrous, so then you might say it has a very good purpose. It honors God. It's a way of creating formality in the shul. Very nice to have an organ. But the problem is, he's saying here, an organ really isn't that. You can see how you might bicker over this. He's saying the organ is an imitation of an idolatrous practice, because Christianity for Jews is idolatrous. Now that is you can see that would be the source of some argument, right? Because the truth is they didn't just use it for church. You saw in the picture that they also used it for the birthday of King Leopold. And I'm sure they used it. All right. And remember the Maram Shik, I think it was, said they also use it in concerts. They also use it, right? It's just because it's true, churches always use an organ, that's a very hard call. In other words, And does your intent have something to do with it? If you are doing it in shul because churches do it, but it's very easy to argue that's not. You're not. It's true churches do it, but churches do it because it's a sense of honor. So that's why we do it, and that has a purpose, and that wouldn't necessarily be forbidden. You could see where the Reform argument and Orthodox arguments are very much, and why. Somebody just asked me yesterday. They said we're talking about women rabbis. We're going to engage very soon, probably in the hiring process to hire a woman. So somebody was asking me, why is it that Orthodox don't have, just why haven't they normalized women as spiritual leaders? And I said it's because of the Reform movement and the conservative movement. If there's no Reform and conservative movement, it would be much less issue of what exactly do you call a woman who's a spiritual leader? Do you call her Marat? Do you call her Rabbi? Do you call her Rabbah? Do you call her Director of Education? Do you call her Community Scholar? Right? All these things get played out in different ways in other communities because we're reacting to something. In other words, had there been no Reformation, probably right? You see that the organ in Prague was probably not an issue at all. Because yes, okay, that's a way of creating. It's a very nice dominance, very nice honor for God. But once it becomes Christian practice, that makes it a much harder. That's what that's struggling with. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Well,